Um, I'm a regional admissions counselor with Midwestern State University. I've been working in higher education for, gosh, probably 18 years now. So I've been at it for quite a while now. I've worked at various institutions here in Texas, Dallas Baptist University, UT Arlington, and now I'm with Midwestern State University. So so I've been on the private side, public side, and been working in admissions, all those 18 years. So so happy to be with you today. I hopefully what I share with you today will be helpful as you navigate the admissions process and understanding how that works and whatnot. This presentation is a little bit shorter compared to the other one that I'll be doing a little bit later, but so you should have some opportunities to ask questions possibly. And I'm going to try to make sure I keep a look out on the chat feature. Let's see if I can get that pulled up. And I'll be able to kind of look at questions. Jody, if you want to keep a lookout on questions too, you can let me know if there's a good question that someone's asked. So and we can save questions to the end as well. But I am happy to be with you today. Let me pull up a little bit of information about myself. This is my contact information. If you ever wanted to reach out to me later at some point about MSU or even about just general stuff, I don't mind being helpful as you try to navigate the admissions process at colleges. So that's my contact information. Just recently added a Google Voice number that allows you to text. You can text me or call me at that number. So that's one new way of contacting me. And I am the main contact for this area for students. So just a little bit about the school I represent, Midwestern State University. It's located in Wichita Falls, Texas. That's about an hour-and-a-half drive from the North Texas area. So we're one of those schools that's far enough from home, but not too far. Our enrollment size is about 6,000 students, so a little bit smaller public university compared to like a UT Arlington or UNT. A good bit smaller than those two institutions. So what students like the most about MSU is the smaller, more intimate atmosphere. So just wanted to share just a little snippet about the school I represent. And I've been with MSU for about 5 years now, and I enjoy it. So and as a regional counselor, I live and work in the Fort Worth area to be more accessible to the schools I work with here in the Tarrant County area. And I did want to mention on this slide here, as you navigate the admissions process, try to connect with an admissions counselor. Don't ever feel intimidated about reaching out and talking with someone. If you can find out who your assigned admissions counselor is, that their responsibility is to help you through the admissions process with any questions that you have. And this is just a link that we have. And of course, we got the QR code there you can scan where you can go and get to the right page to find out who your admissions to. Other universities should have a place where you can find out who your assigned admissions counselor is as well, or at least a contact number for the admissions office. And if you can have at least somebody who's your go-to person and your main contact, that's helpful as you navigate admissions, but even the next steps after admission. So so very important to be connecting with admissions representatives. And like I said, don't feel intimidated about reaching out and talking with someone. Our job is to help you through the process. I wanted to kind of go over the two main ways that that universities make decisions regarding admission. So and then we'll talk about if you're not meeting admissions requirements, is there another way of getting into a college? Is there so we'll talk about appeals process or maybe like a bridge program. So those are going to be the three different things we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to talk about rolling admissions. There's several institutions in Texas that have a rolling admissions process. And when I worked at UT Arlington, it was rolling admissions. I think really most of the schools I've worked for actually have had rolling admissions, which usually means a decision can be made within 7 to 10 days or within 2 to 3 weeks of having your whole application submitted, supporting documents, everything's turned in. It should only take a certain time frame. So I'm always telling students, if you've applied to schools that have rolling admissions, if you haven't heard anything in a while, if you've turned everything in and it's been, say, 3 weeks or more, then you need to be contacting someone to find out if certain documents have been received, because it really should only take about 2 to 3 weeks at the most, 4 weeks tops. If for some reason an institution is being a little bit slower in making admissions decisions, but you need to be reaching out to someone. Don't ever just sit back and really, when it comes to admissions and financial aid, you don't want to just sit back and wait and wait and wait. You really want to kind of be proactive and reach out to someone, because something that does happen a good bit at colleges is and this happens at MSU. This happened at UT Arlington as well when I was there. Sometimes students will apply and use a certain name, and then they may have a slightly different name that's listed for their SAT or ACT test scores, or slightly different spelled name on their high school transcript. And when you submit those documents under slightly different names, different IDs, that document can be put under separate IDs. So until you bring it to our attention, your file would never be complete until you bring that to our attention, where we can merge the documents under one ID, complete the file, and then make the admissions decision. So I've seen that happen quite a good bit at the schools I've worked for. So if it's been 3 weeks or longer, get in touch with someone, because it could be a duplicate ID situation where we need to pull everything together into one ID, or maybe we never did receive a document that you tried to send. So be proactive, stay in touch with us. But rolling admissions, we should be pretty quick in making an admissions decision. Usually what we're looking at for a school that has rolling admissions, usually there's an automatic set of criteria that we're looking at. You really don't even really have to ask about, well, what's your acceptance rate? What's your, at schools that have rolling admissions, a lot of times they will put on their website the admissions criteria. If you meet that admissions criteria, it's going to be automatic admission, or you should be able to have a pretty good idea of whether or not you're going to be accepted to that college or university. So, and usually, I know at UT Arlington, MSU, we were looking at, class rank, GPA, and test scores. That's really all that we were looking at to make the admissions decision. We weren't looking so much at the, and you can see the little next bullet point there. Every institution is different, but a lot of times, sometimes an essay may not be required as part of that rolling admissions process. We may not look as closely at a resume or extracurricular activities. We're just looking at that academic criteria. And if you meet that academic criteria, it's going to be automatic admission. If you're a little bit below that, then you might go into like a review process where we do not quite a holistic review, but it's just looking at a couple other things to see if we still would offer, regular admission, or maybe a conditional admission where we limit the number of hours you take, or we require a freshman seminar class the first semester. But that's typically kind of how what the admissions criteria would look like, or what we would focus on, and what may not be looked at as part of the application as with an institution that has rolling admissions. And if you're joining us, make sure you mute yourself, and if y'all have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. Use the chat feature to ask, put your questions in there. Jody will help me keep a close eye on questions that may be asked. I will say, for a school that has rolling admissions, as you're looking at different institutions and whatnot that you want to attend, the transition or admission into certain academic programs, your actual major, could be a little bit easier, or a little bit easier process compared to maybe a more competitive school or a school that does holistic review. It just depends on the size of the university and all that. I know like our flagship schools in Texas, elite private schools, sometimes it could be very competitive to get into a specific academic department for your major. So you always want to be aware of that, and kind of keep all your options open. I think that's why a lot of universities or a lot of admissions representatives and high school counselors will recommend you to apply to several schools, 3 to 5 or maybe 6 or 8, just so that you have options on the table. If you don't get admitted to your top 2 choices, you have other options that you can that you're looking at. A plan B, a plan C. That's good to have, especially when it comes to money as well. So it's good to have options on the table. It's good to be admitted to several schools if at all possible. And I'll give you like a specific example. I know when in the UT system, when I was at UT Arlington, sometimes students would be admitted into the CAP program, the Coordinated Admissions Program, where they weren't admitted to UT Austin, but they got to come to UTA or another UT system school for the first year, and then automatically transfer into UT Austin. But there was no part of that program was that you were not guaranteed admission into certain academic areas. So it's always good to be aware of what you're looking at. If you really want to major in something and it's competitive admission at the schools you've applied to, you may want to include some schools that maybe are not as competitive, in terms of getting into your specific academic area. So just something to think about. But that's rolling admissions. Just know that it should be a pretty quick decision, and don't sit. If it's been 3 weeks or longer, don't just sit back. Be very proactive in reaching out if you haven't heard from that college or university. All right, well, let's jump into holistic review admissions. Most of the flagship schools here in Texas, like a Texas A&M, a UT Austin, a Texas Tech, a Baylor University, an SMU, TCU, your elite privates, they're going to have probably more of a holistic review when it comes to looking at your admissions file. So, so a lot of times there's going to be certain dates when they're going to let you know about admission. So you can always, if it's not on their website, you can always reach out to them and ask, okay, well, when will a decision be made? Just so you kind of have an idea of when you can expect to hear back. Sometimes decisions are made in batches. They'll have a first batch that goes out, and then there may be a second batch of decisions that go out. Sometimes there's early decision. If a school has early decision, sometimes they may have an early decision group that they're letting you know about admission. Then there's a group that comes later. You could even be put on a waiting list. I've seen that happen with students. They're put on a waiting list, and so you're having to wait maybe early spring, mid-spring sometimes to find out if you're getting into that specific college or university. In that case, it's always, I go back once again to say, it's good to have options on the table. It's good to have some other side too, just in case it doesn't quite work out on that waiting list, or if it puts you behind the 8 ball when it comes to scholarships and other things. You may want to have some other options that you're looking at. But yeah, if they're not telling you on their website about when admissions decisions are being made, you should be able to reach out to the admissions office and find out when decisions are being made. Holistic review involves a review of everything. So they're not just looking at class rank, GPA, and test scores. They're looking at your essay. Many of the holistic review schools will require an essay. And they're looking at your writing ability, how well you express yourself. They're looking at unique traits, unique attributes. Basically, how are you set apart from everybody else? And so usually at schools that have holistic review, they have a certain number they're trying to reach to fill their freshman class. And when they get to that number, they're looking for the best candidates to fill those spots for their freshman class. And when they get there, then they're kind of done. Now, sometimes they have that waiting list and they may accept others and whatnot along the way, but they're looking at very specific criteria, who's going to be a good fit and are meeting, are kind of high on the academic side, but also high on the extracurricular activity side of things, things you're involved with. They're looking at how how unique you are, how set apart you are. So anything that you can share with a college or university that has holistic review, just how unique you are, then that's what you want to share. You want to share things that set you apart. How different you are maybe from others, and what you can contribute to their university. So think you have to kind of, before you get ready to apply to a school that has holistic review, you may have to really kind of do some soul searching, I guess, or reflect on really what you have done. If you're someone who's been very active and involved in high school, then it should be pretty easy for you to be able to think of some things or list out some things that you've done that might be a little bit different from others, and that's worth sharing with a college, university that has holistic review. So, but those are some of the things that universities are looking at with holistic review. Many will also look at a resume, extracurricular activities. Your references are usually important, or letter of recommendations, I guess is a better word there. Maybe even a portfolio. And when it comes to references, I would say that or recommendations, you do want to reach out to your teachers kind of early, or counselors, or whoever would like to write a recommendation. Reach out to them early enough where you can get that recommendation or have it submitted before a deadline comes up. So you want to give. You got to think teachers and counselors sometimes are being asked to do several recommendations. So you want to give them plenty of time to work on those recommendations before the deadline, your deadline approaches at the schools you've applied to. And I think it's a good idea. I think as an admissions representative, we always enjoy reading the recommendations from teachers that could speak to what a student's experience was on the classroom side of things, how a student, either how a student excelled in a class, or maybe even how they, maybe was confronted with a challenge or obstacle, and how they overcome that to be successful in a class. So even some of your challenging classes that you thought, gosh, I just kind of barely got by, or I didn't do as well. Sometimes those recommendations can be really good from that teacher or professor who can talk about how this may have not been your strongest area, or your, but you managed to get through it. You persevered and you actually got through that class, even though it was really challenging for you. So sometimes even those recommendations are good, but you certainly could get a community member, somebody that's really well known, to do a recommendation, a counselor, or a high school counselor or college advisor can write a recommendation. But if you can have at least one or two from a teacher, that I feel like and someone who actually knows you pretty well, instead of like a generic recommendation, but someone who can really speak about what you've done in their class and who knows you very well. That's going to be a stronger recommendation for you, I feel like. And but so definitely reach out to the teachers, not just all community members or high school counselors. It's good to have have those recommendations from the teachers. On the writing side of things, when it comes to your essay, we're looking at your writing skills when we read an essay. Even though I haven't worked at a school where we've done a holistic review, there's been times where we've taken students through an appeals process where they've had to write something, a letter of appeal or something like that. And there's been time you'd be surprised what sometimes students submit as part of an appeals process, maybe, and much less an essay to a college university. So I know I've been surprised at the spelling, misspelled words, or just not a well put together writing piece. So whenever you're writing, whether it be an essay, a letter of appeal, anything, always have it proofread. Always have somebody look over it with a critical eye before you submit it to a college or university. Because that's going to be one of the first things that they're look at. How well does the student write? How well do they express themselves? And then write about something that would kind of share more about you and allow an admissions representative to kind of look into your life and see, who you are and how set apart you are. So that if you can kind of focus in on that, then I think that's good. So, and then, like I said earlier, competitive admission into certain academic programs might be something you have to kind of look at that university once you get accepted, possibly at a holistic review school. There could be competitive admission into certain academic programs, and it can still be competitive even at a rolling admission school too, depending on the academic department, especially if it's a well-known program at a college, university. There can be competitive admission into that academic program. So ask the necessary questions to find out, what you're getting yourself into, and that'll help you identify maybe even other options as a plan B or plan C, just in case you're not able to get into your certain academic area. So, all right, well, we'll keep moving along. I wanted to show you an example. Well, let's talk about the appeals process and bridge programs. So if you're not accepted to a college that you've applied for, I'm always telling students and parents to always inquire about the reason for the decision. If you're confused about the decision and you're like, well, why didn't I get accepted? I don't know why that decision was made. Don't take it at face value. Always call, email, do something to inquire why that decision was made. It may be that you're missing the requirement just by a little bit, and they could tell you, okay, well, if you improve your SAT or your ACT to this, it's going to be automatic admission. Or if you improve it to this and you go through the appeals process, I feel like you'll have a good chance when the admissions review committee looks at your information, then I think you'll have a better chance of getting accepted. Or they could say, well, if you submit an updated high school transcript with a little bit higher GPA, then there's a better chance. So always find out why, because it could be you're just barely missing that automatic admission criteria. And then if you're still a little ways off, they can still put together a plan. And that's what I always like to tell students and parents. Even if we're not able to grant you admission like right away after having that conversation or you turning something in, we can at least put together a plan for you. If you really want to be at MSU, if you really want to be at a certain school, we can put together a plan that will help you get there. And it may involve different things. Maybe it may involve retesting. It maybe you've taken a lot of dual credit classes and you haven't submitted that transcript. Maybe it's submitting that college transcript showing the dual credit classes you've taken, how successful you've been in those classes. There's different things that you can do to increase your chances of an admissions decision in a second round, I guess. Or we can go back and reevaluate our decision by you submitting new information, an updated high school transcript, a higher test score, maybe a dual credit college transcript. And even if we're not able to, if you're still just a good ways off, you can inquire about the appeals process or a bridge program. And usually the way the appeals process works that I've experienced in the past, once you've submitted all your best GPA, your best test scores, once you've kind of got all your information in and submitted, even your most up-to-date information, then we can share more about the appeals process. And usually that involves like a letter of appeal, like a 1 to 2 page letter of appeal, recommendations, 2 to 3 recommendations, maybe a resume of activities, and usually that's all that would involve. And then it goes before like an admissions committee, and they'll reevaluate everything. And if you're close enough, sometimes if they like what they see, even though you're not quite meeting the set requirement, sometimes they still would offer admission or a conditional admission where they limit the number of hours you take or have you take a freshman seminar class. So there's still a way to possibly still get accepted by going through the appeals process. If not the appeals process, I know some schools have a bridge program. I know I'm familiar with Texas Tech has like a bridge program where if you're not quite meeting their admission criteria, I think you do 12 or 15 hours or so at a community college. And if you have a certain GPA, then you're able to transfer into Texas Tech. And that's so you're taking some coursework at a community college, but it's like a bridge program where you've got a set criteria that you're trying to meet. Once you meet that criteria, then you're able to, it's that bridge admission program into their university. At Midwestern State University, we started a new bridge program last year, and it's our Vernon College to MSU program, where if a student's not quite meeting admission criteria and was not offered admission, the student can sign an agreement that we send a letter in the mail. There's an agreement that you send back. And if you sign that agreement, we admit you into this bridge program, the Vernon College to MSU program, that allows a student to live on the MSU campus and take one class with us, and then the rest of their classes are with Vernon College, which is Vernon College has a satellite campus right across the road from MSU. So, so a student would have 3 or 4 classes with Vernon College, 1 class with MSU, living on the MSU campus, still involved with the things that MSU students are involved with. And then once the student gets to 18 hours between MSU and Vernon College, then they become full-time at MSU, or they're taking all their classes at MSU. And so that's our new bridge program that we started last year. And we had some students take advantage of that. And it really works well for students who maybe not quite ready for college. Maybe you've taken, we'll talk more about this in the next presentation that I do, but there's this state required placement test called TSI, the Texas Success Initiative. Some of y'all have had to take this if you're taking dual credit classes, but if you haven't scored well on that and you're having to take remedial classes starting out, a bridge program is not a bad way to go. That way, instead of taking a remedial class at a much higher price or expensive price at a 4-year university, if you're taking your remedial classes through a community college, like the way it would be at MSU, you taking your remedial classes through Vernon College, and then at a much cheaper price. And then once you're done with those remedial classes, you step into those other classes that are required for your major. And sometimes that's kind of a good way to go about it, with that bridge program. So bridge program is kind of meant to kind of, help you with that transition to college, and for students that might not quite be ready for the academic rigor of college. So bridge programs can be good. Sometimes students don't like to think about it or like, well, I want to come in the regular way, but sometimes bridge programs can be helpful to you. And some bridge programs might even require you to come early. Maybe you come in the summer before the fall semester starts. You come in the summer, you take 2 or 3 classes, maybe even a freshman seminar class. And as long as you do well in those classes in the summer, you're able to continue on in the fall at that college university. So that's kind of how bridge program would work. And then I wanted to show you, I thought I'd just use the MSU admission standards as giving you an example of test optional admissions this year. A lot of universities became test optional last year in the spring when the pandemic started. And there was a lot of changes being made late spring with everything that happened. And then a lot of universities have decided to continue with test optional, where they do not require an SAT or ACT as part of the admissions process for spring 2021 and fall 2021. So for seniors right now that are applying to colleges, they're not all of us, but I think a good many of us are test optional. You would not be required to submit an SAT or ACT. We would mainly be looking at your high school transcript, your diploma plan, the classes you've taken. We'd be looking at all of that to determine your admission, and not requiring the SAT or ACT. So, and I was looking at some other schools. I was even looking at SMU last night, and they even have a test optional policy as well, where they're making the admissions decision even without the test scores as well. So, but we all can be a little bit different in terms of maybe what that criteria is. So like a rolling admission school we talked about earlier, there's a set criteria, like what I'm showing you here is a set criteria. At a holistic school like SMU or TCU, their test optional admission might look a little bit different, or they may not actually share that with you. You're just going to have to apply, submit everything, and in that holistic review, minus the test scores, they'll make the admissions decision. So, but you can see here, like MSU, if you are not submitting a test score, you can and usually our automatic admission criteria across the board, whether you're submitting a test score or not, top 25% is automatic admission. If you have an unweighted GPA of a 3.0 or higher, that's also automatic admission, whether you're submitting a test score or not. But the one thing that is a little bit different on the chart on the right, if you're with no test score, a student with a 2.75 to 2.99 could also still get, we review their application and review everything, but if they've got a solid GPA and everything looks good on the academic side of things, then a student could still be offered unconditional admission or regular admission with no conditions or anything like that. And then a student with a 2.5 to 2.74 in a review, when we review their file, could be offered conditional admission, where we may require a freshman seminar class and limit the number of hours to only 12 hours for the fall semester. So a student could still get, and then and then you can see our Vernon College to MSU program will be the next level down. So there's some other options that students have without submitting that test score. And if you look on the left-hand side, if a student does submit test scores, it reverts back to our old scale, where you can kind of see a second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, there's certain test scores that we require. And even though you have that set requirement like that, if you're not meeting our automatic admission criteria with the top quarter or a 3.0 GPA, we're always going to review the application file. And we have a certain criteria that we look at on our end, where like a minimum SAT, ACT, a minimum GPA. This is where we still could potentially still offer like an admissions decision if you're not meeting that specific requirement. So there's some wiggle room there, but this just kind of shows you how we're kind of looking at it differently with test optional admission. I will say for us, we thought we would offer scholarship money without a test score, and we just couldn't get the numbers to kind of match up to be able to do that. So we still are requiring SAT, ACT for scholarship purposes. So at MSU, and it could work this way at other schools too, you have to inquire and find out. But if you're wanting to be considered for scholarships, you may need to submit an SAT or ACT. Now, we don't have to have it on the admission side. We could grant you admission based off your high school transcript, application, all that, but you would just need to make sure a test score is on file with us before our scholarship deadline, which is April 1st. So we have a later scholarship deadline, which gives folks plenty of time to get a test score submitted or retake it and submit a higher score. But I did note on SMU's website, I noticed last night, I was just looking at their site, looks like they are considering people for scholarships outside of test scores. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you can submit test scores to them and they'll look at that, but it's not necessarily a requirement. They're looking at everything that they look at in the holistic review. They're looking at all of that to determine whether a student would qualify for scholarship money. So it's going to be a little bit different at every institution, but find out exactly kind of what it looks like on the admission side when it comes to not sharing an SAT or ACT, but then also find out, okay, for scholarships, are you going to require me to submit a test score? So how are we doing on time, Jody? I haven't been watching the time, but
we have about 4 minutes left in this session.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'll switch over to the other one.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up here. This is just an example of what we offer in the way of campus visits, and the campus visit, guys, is very important. Even now, even during the pandemic and all that, a lot of universities are still offering campus tours. I know we opened back up in July offering campus tours, and we limit it to at first we were limiting it to 1 student per tour time. Then now it's opened up to 2 students per tour time, along with their families, and then we make sure the tour guide has to wear a face mask. Our guests have to wear a face mask. You know, we certainly sanitize everything before and after each tour. So there, a lot of universities have opened up campus tours again. So even if you're not completely back on your high school campuses yet, or in a hybrid model or whatnot, if you can sneak in a college visit, try to do that, because that college visit is very important as you're trying to make this decision about where to go to college. I'm a big believer in finding the school that's a good fit, and one way to find out if a school is a good fit is by setting foot on that campus and seeing what it feels like to be on campus. A lot of folks, I know we've surprised a lot of students and parents in years where MSU wasn't very high on their list, but when they came and visit, it moved up higher on their list. Like, oh wow, I didn't realize they had this or that, and oh, it just feels right. And so you just never know what that campus visit experience is going to do for you as you're trying to rank your choices and make that decision on where to go to college. But like we talked about, admissions. Admissions is very important. A lot of times students don't really look at that before they apply. But if at school, especially at the schools that have rolling admissions where they have a set criteria, look at that criteria before you even apply. Make sure you're meeting the requirements at some of the schools you're applying to. Why waste an application or application fee if there's no chance of you meeting any of the requirements? So I know I've had some high school counselors in the past that have said it's good to kind of mix things up a little bit. You know, should you apply to all out-of-state schools? Probably not. You probably should have a couple in-state with out-of-state. Should you apply to all private schools? Not necessarily. It's okay to have some private schools in there, but maybe apply to a couple of public schools as well. I had one counselor say one time that it's good to have at least 2 dream schools that you apply to, no matter whether you meet the requirement or not. That way, there's no regrets. You know, you're allowed 2 dream schools where you roll the dice, see what happens. You know, and that's certainly okay to do. But have options on the table and look at the admissions criteria so you can kind of figure out, okay, because you want to have a good chance of getting maybe at least 3 to 4 acceptance letters, so you have at least some options on the table, and you can do some researching on the front end to kind of help you with that, determine those schools that would you know, where you'd have a best chance of getting accepted. So, and talk to an admissions representative. We don't mind talking to you early, even before you apply or whatnot, and helping you figure things out. So we're there to help you through the process. And this is my last slide. If you happen to want more information about MSU, you can scan the QR code and fill an interest card out. But I have to throw that in there as an admissions representative, right? But do we have any questions, as we have only a minute or so left, I think? There may have been some questions in there. Jody, do you see anything in there that was really good?
I've been watching it. There haven't been any questions, or if there have been, we've answered them.
Okay.
How about the contact information?
Any questions before we switch over?
Would you like my contact information?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can.
I missed that at the beginning. Sorry.
I'll just kind of go back real quick so you can just take a picture of it real quick. But yeah, there's my contact information right there. I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful, giving you a little bit of insight on the admissions process and the different ways we review, and the test optional part of it, which is newer this year.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank y'all.
You.
Okay, so we are going to switch over to I've been accepted, now what?
Okay.
So if you are on the meeting for that presentation, stay with us. If you're headed to a different session, you can go ahead and leave this one and head to your new one.